In 1953, the CIA launched a program so secret, so illegal, so deeply disturbing, that when the truth finally came out, the United States Senate could barely believe what they were hearing. This is the story of Project MKUltra, the CIA's classified mind control program, and almost everything about it sounds like something from a horror movie, except it's all real. It started with fear. The Cold War was at its most paranoid. American soldiers captured in Korea were coming home broken, confessing to crimes they didn't commit, denouncing the United States on camera. The U.S. government was convinced the Soviets had developed a way to control the human mind. They called it brainwashing. And the CIA was terrified they were already losing the war, not on the battlefield, but inside the human brain. So in April 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles gave the order. He approved a covert research program unlike anything the U.S. government had ever attempted before. The mission: develop techniques to control, manipulate, and if necessary, destroy the human mind, using any methods available. They called it MKUltra. The man put in charge was Sidney Gottlieb, a chemist from New York with a limp and a stutter, who had dreamed his whole life of serving his country. The CIA gave him nearly unlimited funding and zero oversight. He reported directly to the director. No paperwork trail, no accountability. Gottlieb became one of the most dangerous scientists in American history. The program was enormous. 149 separate sub-projects across 80 different institutions, universities, hospitals, prisons, mental asylums, pharmaceutical companies, all of them secretly receiving CIA funding. None of them, or almost none of them, told the full truth about what they were doing. The main tool was LSD. Scientists believed lysergic acid diethylamide could shatter a person's psychological defenses, leave them open to suggestion, controllable, reprogrammable. The CIA wanted to turn it into a weapon, a truth serum, a way to break enemy spies, a tool for creating sleeper agents who didn't even know they were assets. To find out if it worked, they needed test subjects. They started with volunteers inside the CIA itself. Agents dosed each other. They dosed colleagues at parties without telling them. They dosed military personnel during supposed experiments with gas masks. Then they went further. They moved into prisons. They offered inmates reduced sentences in exchange for participation in drug studies. What the inmates weren't told was what drugs they'd be given, or what the doses would be, or what the actual purpose was. Some were given LSD every single day for 77 days straight. Researchers wanted to see if the mind would break. It often did. Then came the most disturbing operation in the entire program. In 1954, CIA officer George White set up a secret apartment in San Francisco's Telegraph Hill neighborhood. It looked like a normal flat, quirky decor, art on the walls, comfortable furniture. But behind the mirrors, federal agents with cameras and notepads. White hired women to bring men back to the apartment. Then those men were secretly dosed with LSD without their knowledge or consent. Agents watched through one-way mirrors, taking notes, studying what happened to the human mind when it lost control of reality without knowing why. They called it Operation Midnight Climax. It ran for years. A second safe house opened in New York. White reportedly enjoyed the work. He later wrote to Gottlieb, and this is a real quote, "I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic, but I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun, fun, fun." He was describing secretly dosing civilians with hallucinogens for fun. None of the men who were drugged ever knew what happened to them. Most of them went home confused, terrified, convinced they were losing their minds. They had no way of knowing the U.S. government had done it to them. But Operation Midnight Climax was only one piece of MKUltra. At Harvard University, a psychologist named Henry Murray ran a series of experiments on 22 undergraduate students between 1959 and 1962. The students were told they were participating in a study about personality development. What actually happened was something else entirely. Each student was asked to write a detailed essay about their deepest beliefs, values, and life philosophy. Then they were brought one by one into a small room, wired up with electrodes to monitor their vitals, and subjected to brutal psychological attack. A lawyer-trained interrogator tore apart everything they had written, mocked them, humiliated them, forced them to defend their most private thoughts under crushing stress while being filmed. One of those 22 students was a 16-year-old math prodigy named Ted Kaczynski. By the time he left Harvard, he was a changed person. Years later, Ted Kaczynski became the Unabomber, a domestic terrorist who spent 17 years sending mail bombs to universities and airlines, killing 3 people and injuring 23 more. Whether Murray's experiments caused his transformation, no one can say for certain. But what is certain? Those experiments were almost certainly linked to CIA funding, and Kaczynski was never told what he was really part of. Meanwhile, in Montreal, Canada, something even darker was happening. Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron was one of the most respected psychiatrists in the world. He was the first president of the World Psychiatric Association. He had helped evaluate Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg. He was considered one of the greatest minds in his field, and he was secretly receiving CIA money to conduct experiments that would haunt his patients for the rest of their lives. Cameron had a theory. He believed that the human mind could be wiped clean, like a chalkboard, and then rebuilt from scratch. He called it depatterning. To erase a mind, Cameron would put patients into a medically induced coma, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months. While unconscious, they received massive doses of electroconvulsive therapy, electric shocks to the brain far beyond anything considered medically acceptable, up to 360 times the normal intensity. At the same time, recordings played on a loop. The same phrases repeated thousands of times. Cameron believed he could write new behaviors directly into a blank mind. He called it psychic driving. His patients came to him with depression, with anxiety, with ordinary mental health struggles. They left as different people. Many couldn't remember their childhoods, couldn't recognize their own families. Some forgot how to talk. Some forgot how to use a toilet. Cameron destroyed his patients in the name of science, and the CIA paid him to do it. When his experiments were later exposed, Cameron was dead. He never faced justice. His victims spent decades trying to get the Canadian government to acknowledge what had happened to them. Many are still fighting today. Back in the United States, the experiments continued to escalate. At the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary and a detention facility in New Jersey, prisoners were given psychoactive drugs, subjected to sensory deprivation, kept awake for days at a time. Some were given combinations of drugs specifically designed to induce psychosis, to see how close a person could be pushed to complete mental collapse, and whether they could be pulled back. Not all of them could be. And then there was Frank Olson. Frank Olson was a 43-year-old Army biochemist working at Fort Detrick in Maryland. He was brilliant, well-liked, devoted to his family. He was also one of the few people inside MKUltra who had begun to have serious doubts about what the program was doing. In November 1953, Olson attended a retreat with CIA colleagues at a cabin in rural Maryland. At dinner, Sidney Gottlieb secretly dosed the drinks of several attendees with LSD. This was the first time Olson had ever taken any hallucinogen. The trip hit him hard. In the days that followed, Olson became paranoid, despondent, convinced his phone was tapped and that he was being watched. The CIA sent him to New York to see a doctor. He was accompanied by a CIA handler at all times. On November 28, 1953, 9 days after the retreat, Frank Olson fell from the window of his room on the 10th floor of the Statler Hotel in New York City. He was found on the pavement below, still in his underwear. The CIA immediately ruled it a suicide. His family was told he had jumped. No investigation, no explanation. The file was closed. For 22 years, they believed it. Then in 1975, during a congressional investigation into CIA activities, Frank Olson's name appeared in a report. His family finally learned the truth. He had been secretly dosed with LSD without his consent 9 days before his death. President Gerald Ford personally apologized to the Olson family, but Frank's son Eric wasn't satisfied. He pushed for decades to find out what really happened. In 1994, Frank Olson's body was exhumed. A forensic examination found evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull before the fall, consistent with being knocked unconscious first. Eric Olson believes his father was murdered, that he was pushed, that he knew too much about MKUltra's darkest operations and was silenced. No one has ever been charged. By the early 1960s, MKUltra was becoming a liability. The experiments hadn't produced the reliable mind control tool the CIA had hoped for. The human brain, it turned out, was far more complex than a chalkboard. You couldn't simply erase it and write something new. In 1964, the program was officially shut down, but the cover-up was just beginning. In 1973, facing growing scrutiny from Congress about CIA activities, Director Richard Helms made a decision. He ordered the complete destruction of all MKUltra records, every file, every experiment report, every list of subjects, every piece of evidence. Thousands of documents were shredded. Helms later testified that he was protecting the identities of individuals involved, but what he was really doing was making sure the full scale of what the CIA had done could never be known. It almost worked. What Helms didn't know was that a CIA employee had accidentally filed a batch of MKUltra documents in the wrong location, a record storage facility in Rockville, Maryland, used for financial auditing. The documents weren't flagged for destruction. They were just sitting there, forgotten. In 1977, a Freedom of Information request unearthed them, 20,000 pages of documents, detailing the scope, the methods, the institutions, the funding, the experiments, everything Helms thought he had destroyed. A Senate investigation was launched immediately. On August 3, 1977, CIA Director Stansfield Turner sat before a joint session of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and testified under oath. He acknowledged the program was real. He confirmed the experiments were real. He admitted the CIA had tested drugs on unwitting American citizens. The country went into shock. Senator Ted Kennedy, who led the hearing, called it a serious threat to the fundamental rights of every American. And yet, when the dust settled, almost no one was punished. Sidney Gottlieb, the architect of MKUltra, retired from the CIA in 1972. He moved to a farm in rural Virginia. He spent his retirement years working as a speech therapist for patients in India. He died in 1999, 2 months after being subpoenaed to testify in a lawsuit brought by Frank Olson's family. Richard Helms pleaded no contest to charges of misleading Congress about a completely different matter. He was fined $2,000. He later called it a badge of honor. James Stanley, a U.S. Army Master Sergeant, sued the government after discovering he had been secretly dosed with LSD during what he was told was a gas mask test. His case went all the way to the Supreme Court. They ruled against him, said the experiment was incident to his military service and therefore he had no right to sue. It took another 9 years and a special act of Congress for him to receive compensation. He was awarded $400,000 for having his mind chemically assaulted without his knowledge. The victims in Canada, the patients of Ewan Cameron, fought for decades. Some received modest settlements. Many got nothing. Most spent the rest of their lives dealing with memory loss and psychological damage they could never fully explain. To this day, we do not have a complete picture of what MKUltra actually did. Thousands of documents were destroyed. We don't know the full list of institutions involved. We don't know how many people were experimented on across all 149 sub-projects. We don't know how many people were permanently damaged. We don't know how many died. Some researchers believe the 20,000 surviving documents are only a small fraction of what existed. What we do know is this: the United States government, operating through its own intelligence agency, secretly drugged thousands of its citizens. It destroyed minds in the name of science. It ran a network of covert experiment sites across 2 countries. It burned the evidence. It stonewalled investigators. It protected the people responsible, and it almost got away with it, completely and forever. The only reason this story exists, the only reason you know any of this, is because one person in one building filed a box of documents in the wrong place. That's how close the truth came to disappearing. And if you think all the documents have been found, remember, the CIA still has classified files from this era. Some of them have never been released. Requests have been filed. Courts have pushed, but they remain sealed. The full truth about MKUltra may never be known, which means somewhere, in a vault or a server or a room that nobody's allowed into, the rest of the story is still waiting.